Hey guys, in today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to make an insane Riddim bass line just like Automhate. If you haven't heard of this guy, he remixed the Moon Boys song Blasta and won the remix competition. As well, a while ago, he just released a song called Jungle, which is absolutely insane. This guy's sound design skills are on point. You guys have to go check out Jungle by Automhate. It's insane. So after listening to that, I was wondering how I could make that bass, and it is a crazy bass. The sound design in that song is insane. So I tried my best to recreate the bass, and today I'll be showing you guys how I did that. So here's a little taster of what it's going to sound like.
You poison the jungle.
So that's pretty insane. That's like some crazy sounding rhythm right there. So I'll just be walking you through how I did this. As you can see here, I've got this whole rack with tons of effects, like tons of stuff going on here. So I'll break this all down to you. So first of all, I'll turn off all the effects, and then let's just go into Serum. So actually for the wavetables here, I'm using a wavetable that I actually made, I think, in one of my previous videos, or at least I showed you how to make in one of my previous videos. The wavetable video, go check it out if you haven't already. But yeah, so if I turn off all this stuff, I'll let you hear it. Yeah, so that's the wavetable right there. And what I've done is I've just mapped LFO2 to this, the position, and that way it just scrolls through the waveform and set it to 1/2. So you can see it's scrolling through the waveform. Next, I've set this LFO1, which is the main LFO here. I've set it on the volume just to control the volume there and set a little rhythm shape. And then I turned up the unison and detuned it a little bit because rhythm basses always sound better when they're a little bit detuned and a little bit messy. And then I just turned down the random all the way so that the waveform starts in the same position every time it starts playing. So the next, I turned on oscillator B, which I just left on the initialized waveform, which is sort of a backwards sawtooth. And I turned the volume all the way down and then turned on some FM from B, as you should pretty much for all rhythm basses. Just modulated that with LFO1. And then next of all, I turned on the sync, and the sync is really just raising the pitch of the waveform. So I just turned that up, and then I set LFO3 on that. And then also I turned up the detune and the unison on this. So this is what it sounds like now. So then moving on to the filter, I've got a high notch 12, and this filter can be pretty useful, especially with this notch filter that's sort of built into it with this frequency knob. So what I did is I set LFO1 moving the high pass filter frequency, and I just turned up the resonance a little bit, and then I modulated this frequency with this LFO right here, LFO2. And then since it was sounding a little bit harsh, I just turned down the mix a little bit and then modulated it backwards with LFO1, just so that you're sort of getting a more unique and modulating sound. And then also it's just taking off some of the harshness that was created by this. So you can hear it creates lots of movement. So then moving on, I've got hyperdimension, which I think is actually a really underrated effect, especially with these rhythm basses. Just applying simple LFO, pumping up and down, can really create some width and really make it sound different. So yeah, you can hear it's getting a lot wider. Next, I've got distortion, and I'm just modulating the drive up a little bit. Flanger, low rate, low feedback, and just modulating the mix. And chorus, same thing, low rate, pretty much no feedback, and just modulating the mix up and down. And the flanger and the chorus are the key to rhythm basses, really. Whether it's a flange filter, or a phase filter, or a comb filter, which you're using, or just the simple chorus and flanger effects, that is the key to rhythm basses. That's what gives you that rhythmy, unique sound. So just putting like low rate and low feedback and then just modulating the mix really gives you like a real like modulating sort of weird sound. Next, I've got some EQ with LFO1. Again, I'm just modulating this band's frequency up and the gain up a little bit. And this one's being modulated backwards and the gain up as well. So they're sort of hitting together to make a valley sort of sound. Next, just a simple OTT, and then I put a reverb on there just to give it more space. Some basses are like that. You sort of need to add a little bit of reverb, give them a little bit of space. It really widens them out a little bit. Didn't change any of these settings really, just modulated the mix up and down so that I'm not getting reverb tails after. But then you will hear I do have a little tail after the last hit of the bass. And what I've done here is I've put LFO 3 on this so that at the end of the pattern that it plays, reverb comes in and fills in the space, so you'll hear. So you can hear that, and that's pretty important for this bass. And then actually this filter is really instrumental. I put LFO 1 on the frequency, and it's just the default low pass filter. And turn up the resonance a little bit, dry, fat, and all it's doing is just modulating up and down, but it really tightens up the bass. So it sounds pretty dark though at this point, that's the only problem. So then what I've done is I've moved on to the effects and used those to brighten it up. Okay, so first of all, I've just got a standard OTT. So you can hear it really brightens it up a little bit. And then as well, I've got another OTT, but since OTT sort of mangles the timing of the sound, it sort of draws the sound out a little bit. I decided to turn the time all the way up to 1000 so it would retain the original timing of it and keep a short, sort of almost plucky sort of bass. So as you can hear, if I turn it down, it sort of goes, but then if I turn it up, it goes. So then I've got an EQ, and I just put that on because the low part of this frequency spectrum was just getting really muddy and really mangled, and since I've got a separate track for sub, I don't want any of that. Saturator next, just set to medium curve, 2 decibels of drive. Got an EQ8, and this is where I sort of did some work. I took out some of the lows. There was some harsh frequencies around there, around 400, 500, 800. That's usually where the mud usually lies, as they call it. So I usually take that out. Then there was actually a nice frequency around 1.5 kilohertz, so I actually boosted that. I usually don't boost. It's usually a good rule of thumb just to only cut frequencies and not boost them, but this one sounded pretty cool to me, and I thought it gave it characteristics that most basses wouldn't have, so I boosted that, and then I just cut down some harsh high frequencies, and then added a little bit of presence on the top end, so this is what it sounds like now. So as you can hear, it really brightened up because of the OTTs, and then the EQ sort of helped clean it up, but it is missing a ton of low frequencies. But don't worry, that gets fixed later on. So then chorus. You obviously need chorus. As I said, it's a rhythm bass. Rhythm basses are built off of chorus. So again, just a low rate, a low amount. And then what I did is I actually mapped the dry wet to a macro right here, chorus amount, just so that I can easily tweak that. Yeah, and I turned up the feedback just a little bit. And then I added another one of those OTTs with the time turned up all the way. Another EQ8, did some more EQing, took out more mud as I explained earlier. Some harsh high frequencies I just removed, and then I boosted the highs for more presence. So then here I just added a tiny bit of reverb, because in the song I could hear it was sort of like a wet sort of bass. It wasn't completely dry, so I just added a tiny bit of reverb, very short decay time. And then glue compressor, which I turned down pretty far, and then pushed up the makeup, and then yeah, you could look at these settings for yourself pretty much. And then finally I've got an OTT with the low band actually turned off. Just by pressing that you can turn it on and off, and I set to 150, so anything under 150 pretty much gets cut out. And then I turned the time like nearly all the way up, but not all the way, because I don't know, it just sounded better, and turned down the amount too because I didn't want too much, and that just crunches it. And by the way, when you put on OTTs, if there's reverb before in the signal chain, it really brings out the reverb. Okay, so onto the sub. So I've pretty much just copied the serum patch over and turned everything off except for a sub, and then just modulated the volume with this LFO right there. Everything else is off, all the effects are off as well. And then just saturated it, and I put a utility here so that I can control the sub level with this macro. And speaking of macros, I forgot to mention that I already had a macro mapped to the FM amount right here on the FM from beat, and then I also had a macro mapped to the sync so that I can just mess around with them and make variations pretty easily. And as well, in terms of automation, I did automate this knob here, the rate. As you can see, it's on quarter notes the whole time, except it turns up to an 8th note triplet right here. So now I'll just move on to the master effects, which were glue compressor and sausage fattener. And glue compressor is not doing much, tiny bit of compression actually, barely any. Bit of makeup. And then I just added a sausage fattener, which if you don't have is just a saturator, but it just makes it sound better. So yeah, just turn up the fatness a tiny bit. And that's the bass patch right there. So as you can see, it's pretty simple. So if I were to give you just a few tips on how to make rhythm basses in general and like make these really gnarly basses, start out with just a simple waveform and just do FM from B. That's the simplest way to start. I would also recommend turning up unison when it comes to rhythm basses. And then as well, I would just use hyperdimension, chorus, flanger, any of those effects that make it wide and messy. To make it really tight, put on that low pass filter and modulate it. And then when it comes to post-processing, just OTTs, EQing out harsh frequencies, saturating it. That's all it really comes down to. And then just add your sub and then compress and saturate. And that's the whole bass. So really, when you look at it that way, it's not a hard bass to make. It sounds pretty crazy. It looks pretty crazy. And it's just a super impressive skill to have. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I really had fun making this. Hope you guys can apply this to your own songs. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you guys next time.